In this tutorial, we'll take you through the steps in creating this social media post design. Sit back, relax and enjoy. Create a new file with the width of 1080 by 1350 with a resolution of 200. Let's import all our files. So let's start with creating the background. But before we do that, let's change our foreground color. To this hex code. Okay, let's zoom in. Let's get back to the S code again. This is the S code for the background. Okay, so let's add, before we do that, let's add a solid color using this hex code. Let's introduce our background image. Let's increase the size of our background image. Let's add a blur to the background image with a radius of 9. Let's change the blend mode of the background to soft light. Let's reduce the fold to 45 or 39. Now let's group it and rename it as the background. Let's introduce our beggar. Let's zoom in. Let's duplicate the beggar 2 times. Let's reduce the size of the duplicated beggars. Let's reposition the duplicated beggars. Let's select all the beggars. Let's zoom out to see what we have on our final canvas. Let's increase the size a bit. Let's zoom in. Now let's add some shadows to the sides. But before we do that, let's add a layer which will hold the shadow. Let's change our foreground to black for the shadows. Let's add the shadows on the sides. Okay, let's change the blend mode to multiply. Let's add a Gaussian blur. 31 or 32 is fine. Okay, now let's also add another layer for the shadows that will be on the base of the background. So let's add another layer for the shadows. Okay, let's increase the size of the brush this time. Okay, so let's transform the shadows. Let's increase it a bit. Okay, let's duplicate the shadows this time around again. Now let's change the blend mode for the shadows. The first one should be multiply, then the second one should be overlay. Okay, now let's add for the multiply shadow, let's add a Gaussian blur to it. Let's see, 32 should be okay. So this is a multiply, that's an overlay. Now let's change the position. Let's put the overlay on top a bit. Let's reduce the opacity for the overlay. Let's see. Let's see what we have. So this should be fine. Now let's group it and rename it as shadow. Now let's duplicate it 2 times for the other beggars. But let's reduce the size. Since the other beggars are too small, let's reduce the size and probably position it at the right places beneath all of them, or beneath all of the beggars. Let's duplicate it for the other one. I think we can do better for the shadows on the sides. Let's reduce it a bit so that it's not that what do you call it? Yeah, I think it's fine at this level. Okay, now let's create a reflection for the beggars, but before we do that, let's group all of the shadows. No, let's group all of the beggars, I should say, but I think we should reposition. So let's group, let's reposition the shadows. If I should say, yeah, the shadows should all be beneath the beggars with the exception of the shadows on the sides. So now let's regroup all of the, let's select all of the beggars and duplicate it. You have to duplicate it, but this time around let's merge it. Let's merge the duplicated beggars by pressing Ctrl E. Let's transform it. Let's reflect. Okay, for our reflection, so we bring it down a bit. Probably we shouldn't have merged it. Let's undo what we have. Let's undo. Okay, now let's group it, if I should say, rather, instead of merging it. Let's transform. Let's reflect it for the reflections. So now let's bring it down. Let's bring it down. Let me zoom in so that we have. So after we've done, let's ungroup it so that we can what do you call it? We can position it at the right place. Let's ungroup it by pressing Ctrl Shift G. The sides, let's position it here. Let's do that for this one. Let's do that for this one too. So the reflection should be fine. Let's zoom out so we see what we have. So now I think we can merge it now. Let's merge all of them now, since we have them positioned at the right places. So now let's merge all this. Let's merge it and add let's merge it by pressing Ctrl E. Now we can now add our, what do you call it, our gradient tool to it. Let's add our max before we do that. Now we can now we can add the fill to it, with the gradient fill to it. Let's zoom in. Now let's apply the layer max. Now let's reduce the opacity a bit. Let's see what we have. Let's reduce the opacity. So let's say 23. 23 is fair. So let's rename it as our reflection. And that should be beneath the shadows, so that we have it nicely placed like this, nice and neat. Now we can regroup all the beggars together with the shadows. We can group them into one folder and rename it as shadows, and rename it as beggars. Okay, so let's rename it as beggars. Now let's introduce the lady. So let's change the position. Let's flip it horizontally. Let's edit the picture of the lady. Before we do that, let's duplicate it. Okay, let's increase the temperature, exposure, so let's say 0.15, the contrast to 17, the texture, the clarity, and also the vibrance. On the size of the detail, let's sharpen it a bit. So now we can see how the image was before and after. Okay, so with that done, let's add some light to the background. Let's add some light to the background, but before that, let's change the foreground to this hex code. So let's first of all group these layers and name it as photo. Now let's add our light to the background. Let's create another layer with our brush selected. Now let's change the blend mode to screen. Before we do that, let's also add a Gaussian blur to it. Let's change the radius to 80, but let's also reposition that since the reflection is too high on the lady. Okay, now let's also add another light on the sides. Let's add a light on the sides. Let's change the blend mode to multiply. Let's darken it a bit with the hue and saturation. Okay, 56 is fine. Let's say 71. Okay, with that done, let's group both layers and rename it as lights. Okay, let's see what we can do by adding some elements to it. First of all, with the elements which I'm referring to, the tomatoes, let's reposition them. Let's increase the size a bit for this one. Let's select this one. Let's position it here. Let's select this one, so let's reposition it here on the sides, maybe here beneath the photo, sorry, of the lady. Okay, let's add also the bezels, the leaves. Let's position them on top of the photo. Let's select them individually. Say maybe on top of the light, preferably. Let's select them individually and reposition them. Okay, let's increase the size a bit here. Let's transform it. Let's position this one here. Let's position this one here. That one there. Let's zoom in a bit. Let's add some motion blur to all the elements. But before that, let's select all of them and make sure that they've been converted to smart objects. Sorry, let's undo what we've done. Make sure they have all been converted to smart objects. As we can see, they are all been converted to smart objects. So now let's add some motion blur to it. Let's add some motion blur to it. Not all of them, but most of the elements. So let's do that. Motion blur 45 with angle of 90 degrees with these settings. So now let's duplicate it for the other ones, with the exception of some, not all of them. So let's see what you can do. Let's duplicate it to the others. As you can see, let's duplicate it to the others. And also let's also duplicate to that of the tomatoes behind the lady. Okay, so now let's add some text to the background, but before we do that, let's regroup all the elements and put it in the element folder. Elements. So as we keep designing, we keep on tidying our layers. Let's group this one and rename it as elements. Okay, so now let's add a text to the background. Preferably somewhere here. Let's add a text to it. Let's add a layer for the text. Okay, let's do that. So let's change the color of our text. Let's increase the font size. Okay, we can do something better to our text. Let's resize the size of our text. Now let's highlight everything. Let's select our text. Now let's change the spacing in between the text. Okay, now let's also change the color of our. Before we do that, let's transform the text to an italic. I think we can duplicate we want to create all the text in different lines, so let's duplicate it 2 times so that every text will be on its own. So let's do that. Let's do the edits. Let's do the edits. So that every text will be on its own line. So you can have it as this. Let's see what we have. So each text is on its own line. Let's give them a different color. Let's use this text code, this color code, sorry. Maybe we can also increase the size of the, take a bite of, let's increase the size, or okay, let's leave it as it is. Maybe let's increase that a bit. Also that of the, let's change the color from white to this. I think we can, let's see what you can do to the color. It's showing, so we can just leave it as it is, or we can do something better. Let's see what you can do here. Let's see. Okay, let's use this color code. Change the color code for this one. Now let's reduce the size of this. I think what we can do is that let's select all the photos and the elements and maybe bring it down a bit to create some spacing for the text. Sorry, let's be very particular about what we move. Let's see, with the exception of the lighting, yeah, to this level, it's a bit appreciable, so that we have enough space for our text. Let's increase the size of the hamburgers, yeah, to that level. Maybe we can reposition the size of the photo again a bit to that side. Okay, let's see. That of the tomato element, let's push it up a bit. Okay, so we can have it like this. Let's position the leaf here. Okay, I think we can add some reflection to the burger. Let's add a bit of reflections to the burger. Let's select the big hamburgers. Let's add, what they call it, a color overlay to it, so that it has the reflection of the what they call it, the yellow, yeah. Let's change it to a bit of okay, let's change the blend mode to hue. Let's say, let's reduce it a bit. Let's make it the color right instead of the hue. Let's make it 50. Give me 24, it's fine, or 28 a bit. Let's see what we have currently without the, but I think it's better without the, let's remove it because it's not, I think it's distorting the, so let's remove the color overlay on the, let's position the bit, yeah, here. Okay, now let's group the text. Now what we can do is no, let's group the text, sorry. Now let's add some adjustment to our final work. I think let's see what we can do to the hamburgers. I think we can do something better. Let's go into the layers of the hamburgers and introduce another layer on top with a brush. The brush of a bit of, let's add a brush. Let's change it to screen, or let's say overlay. No. Let's change it to screen. Let's see. What about let's try the color dodge is too harsh. Okay, let's be going through, or let's say soft light is okay, so that we have a reflection of the yellow, of the lighting of the yellow on it. Let's see what we have here. Okay, so with that, let's add our final adjustments. Let's start with the selective color. Let's increase the cyan to 66. Let's add a photo filter, bit of a yellow. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's add a bit of a vibrance of +80, and finally a color lookup of 3 strip. I think you can reduce the further of the 4 for the color lookup to be preferably 40. So finally, this is what we have. Now, before that, let's group that and rename it as adjustment. So finally, this is what we came up with. Thanks for watching our tutorial. Keep in touch for more updates. Ciao.